Hi, so what I'm going to do today is I'm going to do a bit of a mixed media piece. So what I have here is I have a canvas board that is 40 centimeters by 40 centimeters square, and that's 15 3/4 inches by 15 3/4 inches. And I've picked up some of these, what they're called decoupage or scrapbooking pictures, and I absolutely adore some of the pictures that are in here, and I will put the list of all the links to everything that I use in the description, so if you want to do something similar that you can. And as you can see, there's some great pictures in here that can be used, and I've got steampunk ones, but there is lots of other ones that you can use as well. And I will also be making some coasters later on with some of these. So the one I've actually chosen to use today is this one. I love this. This was an idea that was given to me by a very good friend of mine, an avid subscriber, person who comments all the time. She's really, really good support, great support. And that's a lady called Dolls. So I'm going to be using this picture here, and I'm going to position it in the middle. So I'm just going to paint that with acrylic paint, and when that's dry, we'll be back. So my board is dry now. And what I did was, as you can see, I used a metallic copper and a metallic silver. I just squared it on acrylic paint, and then I just went over it with the brush, got a pattern like this because I didn't want it just to be a flat pattern. And then I used the brush to brush a border around the edges to allow it to dry and then still have this pattern on. Now I've worked out my center, and I've got little dots here, tiny little dots, so I know that where my center is, that's where the picture has to be. And then around this edge, I'm also going to embellish some bits and pieces. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick this down using good old Mod Podge. So I'm going to stick this down, and then I'm going to go over the top of the picture with Mod Podge as well to seal it, so the resin itself doesn't make these colours bleed or do anything to these colours that it shouldn't do. And Mod Podge is fairly easy to use. You just need a brush to go over it and then really stick it down like any other glue. I'll be using these pieces that I've cut out using a aluminium drink can, and these ones that I made using resin. The aluminium ones I just cut out using a die cut that I have with these cogs and my Sizzix Big Shot. They cut really easily through the can, as you can see, and I just use this little point picker to take out all the details. So what I've done here is I've put all my bits around on my board to make a decision on where I want them once the finished picture is completed. And I'm just using the Mod Podge here on the back of these aluminium pieces to stick them down onto the acrylic paint. And I go over them with my brush to ensure that they are fully stuck down. So what's really important here is to make sure that you know where your piece is going to go before you put it down, and ensure every part of the back is covered. Because what you don't want is you don't want any air bubbles getting trapped under it. So I ensure that I push these really down well, and if they aren't stuck down, then sometimes I go around and put just a dab of super glue on it. So as you can see, these are now stuck nice and firm. They're not going to go anywhere. So the first thing I do before I pour my resin is check that my board is level, and as you can see it's level because I don't want my resin running off in any directions. And please, as you can see, please remember to like and subscribe if you like this video. My videos are always full of hints, tips and tricks for the beginner. So I mixed up 200 ml of a 1:1 epoxy resin here, and I'm spreading it over, and I know that 200 ml covers it really nicely without having too much runoff. And I'm using a plastic paint knife here because the resin doesn't stick to it, and ensuring that I make sure that I get this very evenly covered and all the little nooks and crannies of the cogs filled in, because if not you end up getting little gaps and dimples in your final resin piece. But I will be giving this a second coat because some of these are a little bit higher than others, but actually I still want some of them protruding through. So there we go, we're completely finished now, and this has had its 2 coats of clear resin. I've also put gold leaf around it because I want to finish it off and kind of frame it. I put the gold leaf on prior to the second coat of resin, so this is now nicely covered. It's not going to get scratched off, and it also wouldn't tarnish or anything like that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you how I put a back frame on a picture like this. Because it's done on quite thin board, it's been done on a canvas board, then the chances are really high, because it's resin, that this will warp this board out of shape over time and it won't hang on a wall properly. But I don't want to actually put it into a normal frame. So what I do is I make a back frame of it. So what we're using is this beading, this wooden beading, which is 2 centimeters by 2 centimeters square, or that's 3/4 of an inch by 3/4 of an inch square. And I will make a back frame that inserts into the back of this, still leaving a gap all the way around the edge. It'll give me something to use to hang on the wall, and it'll also prevent this from warping out of shape. So I've cut my basic frame out, as you can see here, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to screw and glue this together. Now I always use glue because it just gives that firmer feel to it, and it keeps it much more rigid. Just using some screws. I'm using a Dremel with one of the drill bits in. Again, another reason to get a Dremel. And what I will do is I will put the links to everything that I use in the description so that you can easily find them. So I'm just going to drill these holes now. Okay, so I've drilled one hole, and what I will do is I will then just put one of the screws in loosely. Now I'm no carpenter, so I'm sure there's some carpenters on here watching this that will say he's doing that wrong. So anybody that wants to show me how to do this properly, I'm more than willing to learn. So as I've drilled that in already, I know that when I put the rest of the screws in, they're all going to line up. The other thing is, you don't split your wood by counter drilling the holes first, and it's so annoying when you've measured everything out and then you go and split your wood. So that's all my pieces counter drilled now, and I know that they'll all line up. And all I need to do now is pop some glue onto the ends of this, and I'm using wood glue here, so I just pop some glue on the ends. I always over glue, but I'd rather over glue than under glue. And then screw it all back together. And once it's all screwed back together, it's got a nice tight hold, and the glue will also help it with its stability as well. So there's the basic frame, but actually on its own that isn't enough, because it can still warp a little bit. So what you need to do is you need to put in some supports going across there, and across there. And they're really easy to do as well, because you literally just have to cut them off where you're going to put them at the angle that you've got. All I do is I put the piece of wood that I'm going to cut at whichever angle I'm going to put it in at, like that. I just then draw a line on there where I need it to be cut. I number them 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4. So I know which ones they're going to be next to. And then I just cut those angles. So there we go, there's your supports. And I will attach these supports in exactly the same way as I would attach the other bits. And what's really important is then how you attach this to the actual picture, because if you don't do it properly, you will damage your picture and then ruin all the good work that you've done. So it's really important to follow the steps that I take coming up on how to attach your actual frame to your picture. This is ready now for me to put that picture on. And what I'm going to do is I am going to glue this down with a good helping of this wood glue. So I'm going to put this wood glue all over this frame, and I'm not going to skimp with it. That's now got a really great coat to it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop the picture on top of it, make sure the frame's in the position that I want it by feeling around the edges. Okay, there we go. And avoiding getting any of the glue on the front. And now what I need to do is I'm definitely not going to use a clamp, because if you were clamping this down, it would absolutely leave a dent in the middle or wherever the clamp is. But you do need some pressure on it. So what I've got is these clear sheets of acetate. And acetate, as we know, doesn't stick really very well to the resin. And also it will protect it from the weights that I'm going to put on it. So the weights I'm going to put on it are just some bottles of resin. So they're fairly heavy. I'm going to put the bottle of glue on it as well. Just double check again. Yeah. So there we go. I'm putting that on all the corners. I know that the bottles aren't going to damage this picture. I'm not going to get any weight damage on it. And I'm not going to scratch the front. I will leave this on here now, definitely for 24 hours. Then I'll come back and then I'll show you how I do the finishing touches to the frame on the back. Don't be tempted to cover this with paper towel. Don't be tempted to cover this with cotton. Don't be tempted to cover this with anything that can leave an impression in it. Because if you cover it with a paper towel, you're going to leave the impression of the paper towel. If you cover it with cotton or a cloth or a towel, then it's going to leave that impression in it as well, and it's going to ruin your picture. This is finished now, completely. There we go. That's around the right way. And I'm really pleased with this. The backing now frame is on there, and I have to say, I never have a problem with any of my pictures warping when they're on the frames that I make like this. I've had pictures that have been up on my walls for several years, and they're still as flat as they were when I first put them up. And as you can see, I haven't had to worry about any of the drips or anything that come off here. Didn't tape it off. And actually the reason is for this one, I think it adds a little bit of character to the type of picture that it is. Also, by doing this, I haven't damaged the front at all by using the acetate. And I will put the link to the acetate in the description. It's so cheap, but it is so useful in so many ways when doing resin. So what I will do now is I will now paint the back of this frame black. I will then put a hook on it to hang up, and I'll show you what it looks like when it's completely finished. I will also sign this canvas on the back, and I've decided I like this so much that I'm going to keep this one and hang it up in my house. So that's now painted black. So when I hang it on the wall, it's not going to be shown. This frame in total, probably normally, if I'm not recording, normally takes me about 10-15 minutes to make, put together and attached to a picture. So it doesn't take long, but it's well worth doing. So if you've enjoyed this, please subscribe to my channel and hit that like button. Please leave a comment. I love comments. Check out my next video and join my Facebook group, How to Resin with Steve McDonald, for lots of tips, tricks, and really useful videos. Thank you. Bye. Okay, so this is it hanging on the wall in my house. I'm really pleased with it. This is definitely not going anywhere now. I love this picture. I'll move up a little bit closer to it. I'm really pleased how that's come out. And I'm going to do two smaller ones to go either side of it as well at a bit of a lower level, so they match, and tie it all in.